Okay, so what they asked me to share with you today was something personal. So I'll share with something personal. Perhaps a drop unconventional, but I hope it'll be interesting for you. I was not raised Orthodox, to understate the case 1,000-fold. And when I first sort of stumbled into this community, there were a number of things that I found which struck me as, I don't think it's too strong a word, bizarre. Which I think is normal. I think anytime that you visit a foreign culture, if there aren't things that strike you as bizarre, then your eyes aren't open. Yeah, I mean, like, I grew up in a different place. I grew up in LA on the beach. So it's different than this world that I'm occupying now. So if you don't notice that there's things that are very strange, then you're not really paying attention to the culture. So I made a very long list of everything that I thought was bizarre about the Orthodox world, which I'm not going to share with you today because that would take days. But what I thought I would do with you is I would share like my top 3. And my intention in sharing to you the things that I thought were the most bizarre about the Orthodox world is that perhaps if you have noticed things that are strange, then watching how somebody else processed through what they found bizarre might help you with your own personal approach to what you find to be bizarre. Yeah? In other words, obviously you're not going to have the same list as I've got, and you're not going to have the exact same approach to them as I took. But when you see how I approached it, it might inspire you. So then you'll want to go and handle the problem yourself in a different way. Yeah? So that's the goal of this next 45 minutes or so. Okay, now, let's start with something which I think it's almost impossible not to notice. When you encounter Orthodox Jews, their literal obsession, it's not too strong a word, their obsession with picky-uni, itsy-bitsy, little tiny details. Yeah, like I grew up in a religiously conservative home. We were part of the conservative movement. And so we had the Sabbath. And every Friday night, my mom would light Sabbath candles, and then we would go out for Chinese food. And it was a ritual every single week, right? Sabbath candles, Chinese food. So if you would ask my parents, when is the Sabbath? My parents would tell you it's from sundown to sundown. That's when the Sabbath is. Now, you walk up to one of these Orthodox Jews and you ask them, when is the Sabbath? And they're going to tell you it's 7:14 and 22 seconds on this side of Har Nof. Yeah, it's 28 seconds on the other side of Har Nof, by the way. And they're not kidding. They're not kidding. Yeah, and when does it go out? It goes out at 8:49 and 11 seconds. And it says that in their calendar. This is not a joke. I'm not exaggerating. Yeah, like to the second. Yeah, I have a calendar at home that goes to the 10th of a second. Yeah, and then they're not kidding. So at a certain point you realize they have become so obsessed with the trees that they've completely lost sight of the forest. Meaning, do you think when God said there should be a day of rest that he meant like 8:49 and 11 seconds? Yeah, in other words, was that the intention? Yeah, I'll give you a lot of examples of the exact same psychological phenomenon. This is like OCD for religious people. Yeah. Here, I'm not supposed to tell you this. Do you know that Orthodox Jews put on their right shoe before their left shoe?
Yes. Right, left, tie left,
tie left, tie right.
Oh, yeah. According to some opinions, according to other opinions, right. Okay, how about this? You probably never heard this one. Do you know that there's an order in which they cut their fingernails?
Oh,
yeah? That. Right? No kidding. Yes?
By order of importance?
No, not order of importance. It's just like that's how they cut it. It's not like, well, this is a more important finger. Like, oh, so that's a fascinating question, right? And I would love to know the answer to that. But do you realize that there is no part of their life that is not like this? In other words, like, it is an obsession with the tail that is. I'll give you one. When I met my wife is a vegetarian, so I became a vegetarian. And I was a vegetarian for 7 years. Then I stopped being a vegetarian. It's a very interesting story why I stopped being a vegetarian, but I don't have time to tell you right now. But I stopped being a vegetarian. I was not a vegetarian for like 20 years. Then, like, I don't know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I became a vegetarian again. I'm more of a strict vegetarian now than I was. I'm a vegan now, so that was like, very extreme. Yeah. So like this. When I first started with my vegetarianism, it was for moral reasons. And I had become aware of the way that animals were killed, and I didn't want to participate. And I was a high school teacher at the time in LA. What I would do is I would take my high school students once a year down to East LA, where they have the largest slaughterhouse in East LA.
I used to work right next to it. Every morning it would smell like either like donuts on one side and slaughtered pigs on the next. You
Yeah.
could see them going to slaughter on your drive to work.
That's right, yeah. The massive, a whole like yard full of cows, and they're all being driven towards one place, yeah? And on the inside, I don't know if you ever made it to the inside, but on the inside, the method that's used, this is for most of McDonald's meat in Los Angeles, yeah? The method that's used is something called bolt shot. By the way, it's the most popular method for killing animals in America today.
Slime.
Pardon?
Pink slime or whatever.
Oh, so pink slime is something else. Pink slime is something else, but the method for killing these animals is, I'm not going to give you all the details, there's a hydraulic gun that has a BB that's about that big. And the hydraulic gun fires several times per second, this BB, and the BB just eats away at the animal's head until the animal drops. Now, the animal is not dead at the time that it drops, it's just its head's been mutilated. Then they come in with it's like a BB that goes back and forth and just eats away at the animal's head. Then, no, that's not so bad. The bad part is that they come in with chainsaws afterwards and cut the animal up, but it's not dead. Yeah, so it's really, really bad. And the animal's crying, and it's a terrible, terrible scene. So I used to take my high school students there to show them, like, if you believe in this, go ahead, okay? And many of them walked out of that vegetarians. Like, they saw what it was and they said, I'm not playing. Okay, now, I accidentally tripped into studies of kosher slaughtering because 3 times now in the last decade, they've attempted to ban shechita, kosher slaughtering in Europe. And there's been a response from the Orthodox community. They hired independent organizations to study shechita and see how bad is shechita compared to what they're doing. Shechita's kosher slaughtering, how bad is it compared to what they're doing in the rest of the world? So the method for kosher slaughtering is they take a long knife, and this knife has to be sharper than any surgical instrument. You move your nail across it. If there's a nick anywhere in the knife cannot be used, right? Because the animal might feel that nick, okay? This knife is so sharp that it cuts like a piece of paper, like a paper cut, yeah? Now, when the actual stroke is done, it has to be one continuous stroke. If the man stops halfway through and then starts again, the animal might have felt it. The animal's treif. You can't eat it. They take it and they give it to non-Jews, but an Orthodox Jew won't touch that animal. Right? After the slaughtering is over, they check it again. If there's a nick anywhere in the knife, perhaps it was missed before. Therefore, you cannot eat from this animal. When they actually make the incision has to sever the 2 main tubes going up through the throat. Okay, now, why is that significant? When they did these EEG studies of animals being killed in different ways, what they found was if you put an EEG, an electroencephalogram, on an animal that's experiencing bolt shot, it looks like a volcano is going off inside of the animal's brain. Yeah, it's terrible. Okay? If you do an EEG on an animal that's killed kosher, it goes from normal brain activity to flatline instantly. Why? Because if you sever both of the tubes going up the throat, by the way, Jewish law requires that they be severed 50.00% or higher. If you sever the 2 main lines going up through the throat, 50.00% or higher, what ends up happening is, before the pain impulse can ever go from the throat to the spine and then up into the brain, the blood has already dropped out of the brain and the brain is numb. So therefore, it is technically impossible for an animal to be killed kosher and feel pain. It cannot happen. In fact, the only other method of slaughtering that they found, which causes as little pain for an animal as kosher slaughtering, is if you anesthetize the animal first, knock it out. However, if you anesthetize an animal before you kill it, you can't eat it. Because at the moment of death, metabolism stops and the drug is locked in the animal's meat. So therefore, the only way to kill an animal and be able to eat it and have it still be entirely painless, it turns out to be kosher slaughtering. So I was impressed. When I heard about it, I was impressed. I was not religious, but I was impressed. But having said that, these Jews think that if you sever 49.99999% of one of those tubes, then the animal's not kosher. Now, are you telling me that if you severed one of those tubes 49.99999%, the animal felt pain? I don't know. There's never been EEG studies on it, but my intuition says I don't buy it. Right.
Stop, it's in the details.
Oh, so exactly. So this is the thing, is that I can imagine God caring if the animal suffered. But the obsession with the tail is beyond comprehension. 49.99% versus 50%. The animal's not, they take an animal, it's 2,000 pounds of meat. You're talking about $10, $20, $30,000, right? Give it away. Can't touch that thing. It's like this. There was a certain point where I said, I think they're lost. They've become so obsessed with trees, they've lost sight of the forest. And they don't see anymore what God had in mind. So that was my first pet peeve. Okay, now I'll give you a second one. My first entree to this world was I was doing my senior thesis at UCLA. My senior thesis, I was in the English department. My specialty in the English department was 17th century Christian literature, Milton, yeah. And it's very interesting. Milton is a spectacular writer, very inspiring writer. And my thesis was on religions generally, about Christianity, specialized in Christianity, but it was on religions generally. For my senior thesis, I had to interview people from a bunch of different religions, including I had to interview some Orthodox Jews. And there happened to be a yeshiva in Los Angeles at the time. Los Angeles did not look Jewishly like what it looks like today. Today it's very rich there Jewishly, but at the time there was not that much happening. There was one Orthodox yeshiva, and I went to the head of the yeshiva and I got permission to please sit in on classes so I could interview Orthodox Jews there. So he interviewed me, he saw I was Jewish, he said, okay, fine, you're welcome to come in. Just like, you know, I was secular, he said, don't proselytize. But besides that, you're welcome to hang out. So the truth is I had an ulterior motive. I was doing an academic paper, but I had an ulterior motive because I really wanted to learn Talmud. Like, as an English major at UCLA, we had to read, I don't know what it's like now, we were at that time competing with Harvard's English department. So we were reading 1,000 pages a week. I read 1,000 pages a week for 4 years. Yeah, it was an unbelievable burden. So I had read, at that point, basically everything that was of value in the English language. But I really wanted to learn Talmud. And I knew they were teaching Talmud there. And I asked the rabbi, can I go into a Talmud class? And he said, with pleasure. And he gave me a giant volume written in a script that I could not read, with 3 different languages on the page, none of which I could read as well. And I explained to him I was going to have a difficult time with that. Did they have an English translation? And at the time, there was no real good English translation. So he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you a tutor. And he had this high school kid come in. And so there was this high school kid who was like a pint-sized pickle, and he followed me around. He was my shadow. And he every time there was something going on, he would translate for me what was happening. And I stayed there for a few weeks. So the first day, they gave me the schedule, and what they had 7:30 prayers, which of course I'm not going to go to because I'm not religious. But they had 8:30 breakfast, which I do partake of, so I went for breakfast. And then at 9 o'clock they had Talmud study. So I thought I'll go for breakfast, then Talmud study, and then I'll sit for the class. So they had you prepare from like 9 to 10, 9 to 10:30, and then they had a class from 10:30 until 1. And it was spectacular, like mind-boggling. I'd never experienced anything like it in my life. I have a letter I wrote to my girlfriend, who I have since married, and it said there, I have discovered something that is so complex, I will never understand it. Yeah, it was just unbelievable. It was really exciting. So I went to this class, and then everything went great up until 1 o'clock. At 1 o'clock, the class finished, and I closed my book, and like before the folio page had hit the cover, what happened was a guy with a long black coat and a big black hat, right, walked up to the front of the room and gave a bang on the podium. And I look around and everyone grabbed books and was going, and I had no idea what was going on, right? So I just grabbed a book. I have no idea what book I grabbed. It was probably upside down. And I started going, right? And it went in Rome. So I'm trying to fit in. And then suddenly I'm going, and then suddenly everyone goes quiet. And I go, right? Then everyone's going, they're all whispering. Right? And I realized this is a mess. They pray right after. So I had to make a decision. I either had to bolt like 5 minutes before the class ended, which I really did not want to do, or I had to make some strategic plan. You can't walk out once they start. It's very offensive. So I had to make some strategic plan for hanging out there while they're praying. So I decided to do the latter, and what I did was I went down to the Jewish bookstore. There was one Jewish bookstore in Los Angeles at the time. I went to this Jewish bookstore, and I asked them, do you have an English translation of this Orthodox Jewish prayer book? So the guy said, we just got one in. It's brand new. We heard good things about it. It was a little paperback about that big, and it was the first printing ever of a book called the Art Scroll Siddur. And I got a copy of this book. And I brought it back to the yeshiva the next day, and while they were praying, I would open up this book, and it has an eloquent translation and a provocative commentary. And I would study what they were saying. It was like part of the experience. Yeah, they pray, so I'll learn about that too. That's also part of it. So I would study what they were. This went on for a week. After like a week, my pint-sized pickle, this high school kid, comes up to me after prayers one day and he says, Kelemen, you don't pray right. So I'm like, excuse me, what did you want? So he says, I've been watching you. You don't say the words. So I couldn't believe where I thought this was going. And I said to him, what do you mean I don't say the words? So he starts to explain to me, I'm watching you and your lips are not moving. So I said to him, are you telling me that the God that you believe in doesn't know what's in my heart? So this poor kid got all flustered and he just ran away. Okay? But don't have mercy on him, because he came back a minute later holding this giant book. He slams it on the table and he says, it says here you gotta say the words, right? And he's screaming at me. Meanwhile, the rabbi saw what was happening. They came, they grabbed him, they carried him off. Yeah. Okay, but it's too late, because he had already confessed that they think if you didn't say the words, you didn't pray. Now, that is bizarre. I always thought it was the Orthodox Jews who brought the concept of an omniscient God into the world. Yeah? And here, if you don't say the words, you didn't pray. Now, what kind of a crazy, it's like neo-paganism in the middle of Orthodoxy. What is going on? Why such an obsession with detail? Why do they think you have to say the words? I'll give you just one last third one. There was a rabbi in the building who, an amazing, amazing man, who, like, I couldn't communicate with most people in the building because they didn't speak English. All the connecting words were English, but all the nouns were like German and Aramaic and Hebrew, and it was like a dialect I would call yeshivish. Yeah, it was not something that a person outside could understand. But there was one guy there, one rabbi, who when he spoke, he was eloquent, and when I loved the depth and the breadth that he would provide. And unfortunately, so did everybody else, so there was a long line of people to get to him every morning. And if I wanted to talk to him, I had to wait behind 6 people, which meant I was going to blow out a half an hour of my day. So I didn't want to do that. So what I discovered was he would go to breakfast. So at breakfast, I would grab a seat and I would pull it up right in front of him and I would sit across from him. And I would just pummel this guy with all of my questions. And he, every morning, sat across from me at breakfast and he would serve up an intellectual feast. I'm telling you, I felt when he was speaking like I was eating a steak. You know, it was the depth and the breadth and the relevance, right? And the moral beauty of what he was saying. It was spectacular. And it was going great for about 2 weeks. And after about 2 weeks, I asked one of my questions. I don't remember because it was now 30 years ago, but I asked him some question. It must have been like all my other questions, which was like, Rabbi, why do I have to do this? Or why do I have to do that? And he leaned across the table and he had this big warm smile. And he said to me, Kelemen, you keep asking the wrong questions. Okay, now all my radar goes up. Yeah, because like, okay, I was in a foreign environment and he's already starting to say what sounds like apologetics. And I said, what do you mean? And he says, you keep asking, why do we have to do this? Why do we have to do that? Then with this big smile, he says, don't you understand? He says, our theme song, our mantra is, we do it even if we don't understand it. I thought, you're a kook. Okay. Okay, now, I think I wasn't surprised that if you scratch the Orthodox Jew, you find the religious fanatic underneath. I think I always suspected that maybe that was what was going on and that all this superficial rationality was just a show for me. That didn't bother me. What bothered me was, I'm a pretty good judge of people, and I really thought he got me. I thought he was bilingual. I thought he spoke Yeshivish and UCLA. But why would someone who understood where I was coming from, why would he ever confess, even if he believed it? Why would he ever confess, we do it even if we don't understand it? What was he thinking? Didn't he realize in that moment I was going to lose complete respect for him? What was he thinking? Okay. Why such an obsession with detail? Why do you think you have to say the words? And why would anyone in their right mind confess to a UCLA, Harvard-educated kid, we do it even if we don't understand it? What was he thinking? Okay. Now, fast forward the whole movie about 10 years. I found enough of value that I came here to Israel. I studied here. Found it very interesting. Heard about a famous rabbi here that a lot of people were going to listen to, and decided I wanted to go hear him. And I went down to deepest, darkest, ultra-Orthodox Jerusalem, and I stood outside this building where the class was supposed to happen, and I saw all these people streaming in, and someone who was there said to me, there's not going to be a seat, just stand against the wall. And I remember when I got close to the door, I just got swept into the room by this crowd that was pushing into the room. And when I got in, I went for the wall, but the wall was completely taken all the way around the room. I couldn't stand by the wall. All the chairs were taken. I just froze. I didn't know what to do. And someone saw that I was a neophyte, and so he just grabbed me by the arms and he placed me on top of somebody else's feet, which I sort of felt bad about until someone came and stood on my feet. And there was like 3 deep against the wall. And I remember it got quiet, and the rabbi stood up off the bench, and he sat down on the stool. And I remember I could see him underneath someone's nostril and behind someone's earlobe. And he started to speak. And I wish I had a recording of that class. It changed everything. He was lecturing to a bunch of ultra-Orthodox Jews who, it looked to me at least, had been ultra-Orthodox their entire lives. They were all, I would say all, most of them were Israeli. And he very calmly was in the middle of developing this theme for 30 weeks. I walked right in the middle of the 30 weeks. And the theme was that, of course, the purpose of all of the mitzvahs is, he was saying, the purpose of all the mitzvahs is to craft a personality, to create a human being who will be expert at intimacy. And this was just one more installment in that series. And everyone was just calmly listening, and my jaw was on the ground. Now, this was not apologetics used in Jewish outreach. This was one of the most influential Orthodox rabbis on planet Earth, who trained thousands of rabbis, speaking to a bunch of Yerushalmis. And he's telling them that, like as we all know, that the whole purpose here is to create a human personality capable of being expert at intimacy. Okay, now, what happened when I walked out of the room that night? I wish I could replay you the whole lecture, because I think it would have an impact on you as well. But fortunately, I don't remember like the detail, but I'll tell you what happened to me. That I remember very well. I've been doing marriage counseling now for 25 years. I should call it couple counseling, because a lot of people come to me who are not married, but couple counseling. I have never once had a couple come to me, not once in 25 years, had a couple come to me. By the way, 99% of the people who come to me, they're coming to me because their relationship is in trouble. I've not once had a couple come to me where their relationship was in trouble because of what you and I would call a disagreement over a major theme. Meaning like, the reason we have to break up is because she's Jewish and I'm Christian and therefore we cannot continue to go. I've never seen such a thing. She's a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I want out. It's not like that. It is the most picky-uni, itsy-bitsy, silly little tiny things. I had a couple come to me. This is a classic example. Highly intelligent people. If you would have met them, you would consider them to be very normal people. He's a physician. She was a stay-at-home mom. He, for whatever reason, had decided that sugar was not healthy. Refined sugar is not healthy. So I also think like too much refined sugar is not good for you, but like I'm healthy, but he's crazy, right? And he said that he thinks that even the smallest amounts of sugar have very deleterious effects over a lifetime, and it can have the effect of like small amounts of cyanide, essentially. And therefore, you should not be exposing yourself, or God forbid your children, to any sugar whatsoever. So he explained this to her many, many times. She was brought up in a home where the way they showed love for the children was by giving them sweet things. So she was always handing them cookies and candy and stuff like that. Okay. She didn't understand how serious he was until one day he came home and she was giving the kids cookies and he said, "That's it, I'm divorcing you. You're poisoning my children." So she was all shook up and she said, like, "I didn't realize that you felt that way about it." He said, "I've been telling you." He said, "I didn't realize that's how serious it was, and I'll stop." So everything was great for about 3 months. And then he caught her smuggling into the house Cheerios. And that was it. And when they came to me, they were getting a divorce. They just wanted to talk to me because they thought that maybe I could help cushion the blow against the children, that the children would be so damaged by the divorce. This couple was getting a divorce over Cheerios. Okay?
But it's not Cheerios, it's the intention behind the Cheerios.
Oh, so that's what he said. He said, no, it's the betrayal, it's the this, it's that. So everyone says it's the larger theme, but the reality is that what pushes a marriage over the edge is the details, right? Even though there may be a larger theme behind it, that's true, but it's the details which kill the marriage. And I'll show you something in the opposite as well. Very rarely, but now and then, a couple comes to me, and they're doing terrific.
Oh, I get where you're going.
Oh, they're doing terrific.
Oh, wow.
And they come to me, you see where this is going. And I'll give you a live example. I had a young couple that came to my house. Normally they meet me at the office. This couple came to my house. When they came, I was on the phone. My wife said, "Come in." He's on the phone. She wanted to give them privacy. They were newlyweds. She brought them into the kitchen. We had this sliding wooden door that separated our kitchen from the rest of the house. She closed the door to give them privacy, and then she came and she got me, and she said, they're waiting for you. So I got off the phone. I came. I do what I always do before I walk into a room, which is I knocked. Then I slid the wooden door open, but they must not have heard me knock. Because when I walked in, just say they were busy. So I didn't want to embarrass them. So in my kitchen. So I closed the door because I didn't want to embarrass them, right? And then I knocked louder, right? And then I slid the door open. At this point, they had moved into 2 seats, which is actually a very good thing. Yeah. And then I came in and I sat down in front of them. So I said, "How can I help you?" So he says to me, "We'd like some advice for our marriage." So I said, "To be honest, I think your marriage is doing just fine. Maybe you actually could give me some hints, So they said, no, but it's always good. We're at the beginning now, and we thought, if maybe you could give some wisdom, then it would help us along the way. So, okay, that was a smart thing to ask. So I said, okay. Now, most of my interviews are very short, so I developed a bunch of diagnostic tools which I use, which in a very short period of time can extract a tremendous amount of information so I can quickly get to the bottom of what's happening. So one of my diagnostic tools is I'll ask a couple like this the question, do you think your spouse loves you? So I asked him, do you think she loves you? And he said, oh yeah. So I said to her, do you think he loves you? So she said, oh yeah. So I said, tell me something. What makes you think your spouse loves you? So he was really caught off guard by the question. He got all defensive. And he said, well, when I come home from work and I open up the door and I walk in, sometimes she's in the living room and she's there and she looks up and she sees me. She smiles. So I said to him, that's it? So he's like, no, sometimes she makes me a cup of tea. So I said, that's it? That's how you know she loves you, is a smile and a cup of tea? So I turned to her and I said, what makes you think that he loves you? So she thought, and she started to laugh. So I said, what? She said, this morning when he left for work, he left me a little note on the refrigerator. It only had 3 words. So now, is that what makes a relationship fly? A smile, a cup of tea, and 3 words on a refrigerator? That's it? So over the years, what I realized is, yeah, all relationships rise, or God forbid, they fall, they crash, based on tiny, itsy-bitsy, little tiny things. Okay, now, over the years, I've thought about this a lot. And I'll tell you my current theory. You can tell me if this makes sense to you. At present, I believe. The reason for this is, if I notice the big things, that doesn't mean that I love her. Because how can you miss the big things? If I remember, it's our 25th anniversary. That doesn't mean I love her, because how can you miss the 25th anniversary? It's like the big elephant standing in the middle of the room. But if I remember that I took her out for the first time 25 years ago, and I remember at that time she told me that she loved flowers, and her favorite flower were yellow roses. And I remember she told me she liked a lot of the white poof stuff that they put in the top, you know? That stuff. And she told me that she likes the lavender ribbon. She doesn't like red, she liked lavender ribbon. And I remember that night, 25 years ago, she ordered the salmon. And so tonight when I take her out, we come and the maitre d' seats us. And then right away the waitress comes and she's got this big bouquet of the yellow roses with a lot of the, and then the lavender, and then they don't even ask us what we want. The maitre d' comes and he serves the salmon right away. If I do that, it means that I love her, because otherwise why would I have remembered that? So it turns out, someone who is expert at relationship, their mind is attuned to the tiniest, itsy-bitsiest little details. Which means, if you were going to try to create a personality that would be expert at intimacy, I have right now, I've got 4 bestsellers out. I have an idea for a book that would outsell any of my books, right? I'll describe the book to you, you write it, give me the money, yeah? Here's the book, right? It's a brilliant idea. It's a self-help book, literally self-help for relationships. What is it? You buy the book, you read it, and you will get better. And the book will have in it exercises which force you to focus on little tiny itsy-bitsy details. And the book will have dozens, hundreds of these exercises, 4, 5, 613 of them. That night, the rabbi said, the reason why there are 613 categories of Jewish law, categories, which include thousands and thousands and thousands of little tiny itsy-bitsy details, is because the whole point is to craft a human personality that will be competent in intimacy. And until you've been trained to focus on little tiny itsy-bitsy details, you are incompetent at intimacy. You will never be successful. Why are they so obsessed with detail? Because the system is meant to create a person who will connect. But why do you have to say the words? So when I was in UCLA, I developed an interest in psychology, and I became especially fascinated by the psychology of sex differences. And I ended up doing a lot of reading in the area of industrial psychology that focuses on the psychology of sex differences. It turns out that men and women, for example, use language very differently, and it can have catastrophic effects in the workplace unless you put into place protocols to ensure there isn't miscommunication. I'll give you a lot of examples of that. I won't do it right now. But what I wanted to point out is that one of the primary differences in the way that men and women speak is what stimulates masculine speech versus feminine speech. Okay, now, there are no hard and fast rules here because we're talking about a gray scale, and there are women who are more feminine, and there are women who are more masculine, and there's men who are more feminine, and men who are more masculine. So you're talking about an infinite gray scale. But nonetheless, what we do find generally is that men tend to speak when there's some problem that needs to be resolved. There's something that needs to be fixed. There's something that needs to be accomplished. Something needs to be moved around in the physical world. When there's something that needs to be accomplished, then men will speak. Now, this causes all sorts of problems in relationships, because a woman will come home and she'll say, I did this at work, and I did this at work, and I did this, and it was so interesting, and what do you think about that? And he says, good. And then she says, no, but I had this tension with this other friend at work, and then we worked it out, and it was so good, and I felt so good about it. How do you feel about it? Very good. Yeah? And at a certain point, she wants to grab him by the collar and shake him and say, talk to me. Okay, now, men tend to speak only if something needs to be said. Okay. Women, on the other hand, okay, will speak for non-functional purposes. Watch this, watch. I'm speaking to a group of ladies here. Have any of you ever been involved in a conversation with somebody, with a woman, involved in a conversation with a woman who told you the exact same detail twice in the same conversation?
Yeah.
Ever 3 times?
Yes.
Ever seen 2 women walking down the street and they're both talking simultaneously?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. What is going on here? Yes? Why are they doing this? Right? So the answer is not that they don't care what the other one is saying. That's not what's happening. What's happening is this. Women are very sensitive to their position in what I would call love space. That is, that love space. A woman can feel the most microscopic moves into a relationship or out of a relationship. If she's becoming closer to somebody, she can pick that up right away. If she's becoming more distant. And a woman will notice this movement over microns. Now, men also notice movement in relationships, but we measure the movement in men's minds over light years. Yes? Oh, she wants to divorce me. I guess we're not doing well. Yeah? It's right? So there's a different level of sensitivity. Now, because women are sensitive to this, and they're sensitive from the time that they are little girls, therefore, little girls even start to become aware of certain things that you do that propel you around in the world of love space. Okay. One thing that little girls pick up early on is, and this is just intuitive knowledge by every woman, is that the more that I give to somebody, and the more precious the thing that I give to them, the more I care about them. And therefore, like if I tell someone a secret of mine, if I open up and I share myself with them, that creates a fondness inside of me for that person, right? It builds affection. It turns out that the most precious thing that I could ever give somebody, the most powerful jet that I have for moving forward in the world of love space, is when I open up and I talk about what's going on inside of me. Okay? That moves me into relationship. When a woman wants to draw close to somebody, she'll speak to them. And she does like it when someone speaks to her, but she likes it especially because she realizes that person is drawing close to her by speaking to her. She sees that they're moving also. Okay. What I discovered is, okay, that's all UCLA. Now, yeshiva. What I discovered is when I moved into the world of Torah, there's masculine and feminine speech in the world of Torah as well. Masculine speech solves problems. For example, these Orthodox Jews don't believe the world belongs to them. So I pick up an apple, that apple's not mine, but I want to eat it. But I have to somehow get possession over this apple before I can eat it, otherwise it's theft. Who does the apple belong to? God. So I have to ask permission, right? Borei creates, yeah? Can I have a bite? Okay. Afterwards, right? Thank you very much. Borei nefashos rabos. Blessings before and after, they're very functional, right? It's moving things around in the physical world. Okay. That's masculine speech. Where did I discover feminine speech? The rabbi with the long white beard who was giving this lecture, so he made a class for 5 people on how to be a good husband. And it went on for a year. Actually, it went on for 3 years. And it was the craziest, most counterintuitive lecture series. I would go there we went there once a week. I remember I used to go on Monday nights. And he would tell us the craziest things, saying it would be good for our marriage. And invariably, it was like, I would swear that will never help. And then he would give us exercise that we should practice this. And then every Monday night, my wife would say, go back, learn more. Yeah. So one night, he's lecturing. And he explains to us that in order for a relationship to thrive, you have to have private time, uninterrupted private time. And he recommended at the time, he said if a couple doesn't spend 2 or 3 times a week privately, alone, just themselves, without any interruptions, no cell phones, no interruptions, 0, no kids, right? If you don't spend 2 or 3 times a week, he said, your relationship is headed for a crash. So what really bothered me about that was intuitive, meaning I could have figured that out. And almost nothing that he said was intuitive. It was always counterintuitive. So I assumed I misunderstood that lecture. And after the class, I went up to him and I said, Rabbi, when you said we should spend private time together, what did you have in mind? And he looked at me like, wow, you're a bigger idiot than I thought. Yeah? So I said, no, I understand what private time looks like to me, but what does it look like to you? So he said, do you ever take your wife to a restaurant? So I said, sure. He said, next time you take your wife out to a restaurant, he said, and at the time I was teaching here at Neve, right? I had in the city at any given time 2,000 students. 2,000 students. So he said, the next time you go to a restaurant, find a restaurant where there's no Neve students. Okay, not the easiest thing on the planet. Fine. He said, when you get that restaurant, tell the maitre d' in advance, tell him to set up 2 chairs, one across from the other. Take your wife out. And he said to me, throughout the evening, you should whisper. So I said to him, why? So he said to me, don't you feel how small the room becomes when you whisper? So I said, yeah. So I tried this. I did the whole thing, right? I told the maitre d', I found a restaurant where there's none of my students. I told the maitre d', put the 2 chairs right across from each other. Right, we came in, the whole night I whispered, okay? Okay. Okay. Don't try this unless you're married. Yes, it is extremely effective. Okay. So I came back the next Monday night and I said to him, where did you get that? Like I was sure he was learning psychology books in the bathroom or something. You know, like, come on, where did you get that technique? So he said, I got it in the Code of Jewish Law. I said, yeah, right. Laws of dating, you know, like, come on, are you kidding? She said, right here, and he pulls off the shelf the Code of Jewish Law and he opens it up to the laws of prayer. And he says, look what it says here. You want to have an intimate moment with God? You should take 3 steps back from the whole world. Go find a restaurant where there's none of your students.
Oh, gosh.
Then he said, you sit right across from your wife. And throughout the evening, he said, you should whisper. He said, why do you whisper? Because how loud would you speak if you knew that her ear was right next to your mouth? And why do you have to say the words? Because it's the only way to fall in love. You've got to talk, you've got to open up. He told me that night, where is in the human body the hottest organ of intimacy? Right here. He said, it's the mouth and the lips. He says, in Hebrew, this is called the machshir kesher. In modern Hebrew, that means a communications device. In classical biblical Hebrew, it means the device for connecting. The way that you connect to another is by speaking to them. Why is it that these Orthodox Jews think you have to say the words? They know God is omniscient. They think God is head over heels in love with us. And he just wants us to join him in that relationship. And the only way to fall in love is by flexing the organ of intimacy. The more that you open up and say what's happening inside of you, then the more that you love. This is how you do it. Why such an obsession with detail? Because only someone who's tuned into details will be successful in relationships. And why do you have to say the words? Because that's how you fall in love. But why did he think that I would have a drop of respect for him after he confessed? We do it even if we don't understand it. Didn't he realize, like, that is fanaticism? That's craziness? So I'll leave you with a very personal story. I married this girl. And she's the youngest of 4. My father-in-law was abandoned in Germany in 1939 when he was 16 years old. His parents got tickets out and they left him. And he survived alone in Germany from 16 to 18, hiding, pretending he was a German. Finally at 18, like, this was already 1941, his death was imminent. There was no way he was going to survive longer. And he grabbed a hold of the back of a train that was headed for Vladivostok. And he made it to Vladivostok, and then he somehow made it down to Kobe, Japan. And then from there, he caught a boat, and he made it across the Pacific to the United States, landed in the US, was instantly arrested as a German national in the United States in the middle of World War II, 18 years old. He was thrown into a maximum security prison. It only took him a few months to figure out he was a Jew who was escaping. And they said to him, listen, you have a choice. You can spend the rest of your life in a maximum security prison in America, or you can go back into Germany working for us, and we'll give you citizenship when you make it back here again. And he went to a place called Camp Ritchie, which is now famous. They trained there like 180 of these kids as spies and interrogators. And they flew them back over Germany, and they pushed them out of the plane. And when he was 19 years old, in 1942, he was back in Germany again. And he stayed in Germany from 42 to 46 working for the US government. Okay. So he was interrogating, he was a spy. In 1945, when the war ended, he was one of the team that interrogated all the people who went to the Nuremberg trials. He met them all. In 1946, when he helped rebuild the German government, he picked out which Nazis were the least dangerous and put them back into power again. He said there was no one to pick other than Nazis, so therefore they had no choice. And he said, I'm never going back to that country again. And came to the United States, got citizenship, met a girl. They talked about making a better world and a better life, got married. They had their first child, a boy, and said, let's create a better world. And they went looking for something that would be really wholesome and good and honest, and they found Boy Scouting. And when he was old enough, they made him a Boy Scout. My father-in-law was the troop leader, and he got really into it. And then they had another boy, and when he was old enough, they put him in Boy Scouting. By then, my father-in-law was the head of all of Boy Scouting in Los Angeles. He was really into it. And then a few years later, they had another boy. When he was old enough, he became a Boy Scout. And by then, my father-in-law was the head of all of Boy Scouting in California. And then a few years later, my father-in-law had taken over National Boy Scouting. And they thought they were done having kids, but whoops. And they had a girl.
Thank God.
And thank God, yeah. And when she was old enough, she came to my father-in-law and she said to him, Daddy, I want to be a Boy Scout. So he explained to her, well, you can't be a Boy Scout because you're a girl, but you could be a Girl Scout. So she didn't know what that meant. So while all the boys were off doing cross-country bike trips and survival training, she was selling cookies. And she said, it's not fair. So she came back to my father-in-law and she said, I want the cross-country bike trips and the survival training also. So my father-in-law is a very honest man, a very straight man. He actually just passed away. He's an amazing person. And he said to my wife, you're right, it's not fair. And it shouldn't be that way. And he said, put on a pair of blue jeans and a t-shirt, tuck your hair up into a cap, don't tell anyone you're a girl, you're a Boy Scout. And my wife became a Boy Scout. Yeah? And she did the whole thing. She became an Eagle Scout, survival training, everything. Okay? Now, what I discovered is there are advantages and disadvantages. There's advantages and disadvantages in marrying a Boy Scout. An advantage in marrying a Boy Scout is they don't need very much. When I met Hannah, she was like, I had a very successful business running. And I would say to her, I had a lot of cash. And I said, I would like to buy you something. What do you want? You want jewelry? You want perfume? You want clothing? Let's go shopping. And she would say, no, I just want to be with you. And I'd say, no, I'm serious. I want to buy. No, I just want to be with you. Right? And it would make me crazy because I really want to give her things, but she's a camper. She's not into that kind of stuff. So an advantage of marrying a Boy Scout is they don't need very much. But a disadvantage of marrying a Boy Scout is they don't need very much. And it would make me crazy because I'd want to buy her stuff, but she's not into it. Okay, now, over the years, I've discovered a few things that I can actually buy which make Hannah giggle. Yeah, like Hannah likes yellow roses with a lot of the white poof stuff and a lavender ribbon. And Hannah is the only woman I've ever met who doesn't like chocolate. She likes carob. Yeah? I think carob tastes like tree bark, but she likes carob. Yeah? I'm teaching a class here at Neve. This is now 20 years ago. I used to give a whole winter series on intimacy based on that one lecture that I heard. And I'm in the middle of teaching that series, and there's a knock on the door, and Hadassah, the secretary from downstairs, comes in. She'd never disturbed one of my classes before, and she said, I'm so sorry for disturbing. And she reaches in, she hands me a note, she says, it's urgent, it's from your wife. Fine. So that day I had been giving this whole lecture on giving into irrational requests. There's a widespread belief that people have that if your spouse requests something that's irrational, you shouldn't cooperate because you're cooperating with insanity. Okay? And it's wrong, because people are not a cerebrum. Yeah? Human beings have feelings, they have psychological needs, emotional needs. And unless what's being requested is destructive or self-destructive, we cooperate with irrational requests. Yeah, if someone needs something, that's all I need to know is that you need that. So I was explaining this to the class. I get this note, I open it up, and it says, Labe, please double underline. On the way home from work, pick up 2 bags of seaweed. Fine, okay, so I fold up this paper, right? Finish giving my class, I'm giving into irrational requests, yeah? Right? When I'm done, I walk out, I go down to my office, I grab my valises, and as I'm walking out of the building, I'm thinking, okay, if a guy knew nothing about relationships, how would he react to that note? And I'm picturing this guy who says, she didn't say why she wants the seaweed. I'll call and see. She doesn't answer the phone. She didn't say why she wants the seaweed. I'm not going to buy it for her. Okay, now, if a guy reacts that way, the problem is not that Hannah forgot to say why she wants the seaweed. The problem is this guy knows nothing about relationships. Okay, now what actually happened? I walk down the Neve driveway. Yeah, I go to the first makol, it's like a 7-Eleven that I see, and I walk and I say, can I have some seaweed? And the guy says to me, we don't have seaweed in this country. Like, what are you talking about? So you have to go to a health food store. And at the time there was no health food store around here, so I had to go all the way into the center of town. So you have to picture the scene. I'm on the bus, right? And the whole time I'm on the bus, I'm just thinking, cool. Kind of like seaweed, yeah? Like that was a new one. I never knew about that before. I'm so excited, yeah? I get to the store, I walk and I say, can I have 2 bags of seaweed? And the guy says to me, oh. So I said, what's wrong? He says, we just sold our last 2 bags.
Oh.
So I said, oh. He said, but don't worry. He says, just a little bit further down Yafo Street, there's another health food store. If you go there, I said, can you call them, please? He says, yeah, sure, just relax, just a minute. He dials. Ask him if he has 2 bags. Okay, yeah, I have a guy here, he wants to know, I'm asking, do you have 2 bags of seaweed? Yeah. Could you hold them for me, please? He wants you to hold them? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll tell, oh, he's gone. Okay, all right, I'm already sprinting down the street, right? All right, hold on, you can have sprint. I'm kind of like seaweed, yeah. Right, I come running into the store. I'm a seaweed guy. Okay, so calm down, yeah. So I said, you have 2 bags? He said, yeah. So he puts them up on the counter. You want anything else? I said, no. Oh, and I see on the counter there are these trays with different kinds of Care bars. So I said, actually, I'll take 3 of these, and I'll take 3 of these, and I'll take 3 of these, and 3 of these, and 3 of these. He says, you want anything else? I said, no, that'll do it. So he wraps the whole thing up, right? He hands me the bag, I pay, I get the change, I walk out. I'm walking out, and I pass the flower store. I go back, and I say to the guy, no, not red, no, I want yellow roses. No, a lot of that white poof stuff, a lot of it. No, not pink, lavender ribbon. Yeah, oh, great, thank you, right? I walk out, I go home, I knock on the door, Hannah opens the door, and I said, hi. Now, why did I do that? She never told me why she wanted the seaweed. Oh, it's like this is it, watch this. This is subtle. It is not that I don't care why Hannah wants the seaweed. Because when you love somebody, you just want to crawl around inside of them and discover everything that they love. So therefore, I want to know why Hannah wants the seaweed. But I'm not going to refuse to buy it for her until she can justify it to me. When that rabbi said to me, we do it even if we don't understand it, it's not that he forgot that I was UCLA and Harvard educated. It's that he thought that even though I had been to UCLA and Harvard, I might still have a heart left. I was there thinking I was studying religion. And what I was really involved in was I was learning a divine system for creating a perfect human being. And the definition of a perfect human being is someone who is expert at intimacy, someone who can connect and love and be involved in a relationship. Okay, now, the reason I thought this would be valuable for you is, in the early stages, I remember people throwing a lot of crazy stuff at me. And it's like you have a whole bunch of jigsaw puzzles on the table and you have no idea how to assemble any of them. What I just did for you was, I gave you the outer frame of the jigsaw puzzle. Okay. Now, as you travel through your Jewish journey and you get all these crazy pieces, now that you see what the frame looks like, you'll understand where they go and how to place things back into the system. You'll understand what you're looking at, right? And maybe that'll help you process through things that look bizarre to you.